My name is Kevin Schmiegel. I'm the Executive Director of Hiring Our Heroes at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I'm a 20-year Marine veteran. For veterans who are joining us for the first time on Google Plus Hangouts, you're joining us on an industry panel with representatives from the retail sector. And we have two of the biggest companies in the retail sector, Wal-Mart and Verizon. But before we introduce our two panelists from those companies, I want to tell you a little bit about VetNet. VetNet is a technology-based effort to help veterans, transitioning service members, and military spouses find meaningful employment in the private sector. I think of it, and I'm not a technology guru by any means, I think of it as a television station online for veterans, military spouses, and their families. It was created in collaboration with one of the best tech firms in the country, with Google, and three of what I consider best-in-class leading nonprofits in the military family space. They include the Institute for Veterans and Military Families at Syracuse University, a small nonprofit in Atlanta, which is made up of entirely of post 9/11 veterans who help other veterans with their transition, called Hire Heroes USA, and of course our own organization here at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce called Hiring Our Heroes. I think you can also think of VetNet as a virtual career resource center. We're going to be hosting lots of panels like this, question and answer periods, and workshops via the Hangout technology that we're using right now. The nice thing is it's free and it's open to everybody, and the material will fall into one of three categories, and we're calling them channels. That's why I referenced the television station. The first one is called the basic training track. And really that's for younger veterans and those who are kind of in the beginning of their transition process or who have transitioned recently and really need the help. And this is a channel where you can get resources to help you with your resume writing, to help you with your interview techniques, to help you network, to help you get in touch with mentors. And it's basically to give you the basics for your transition from the military to the private sector. The second track, which you're watching right now, the second channel is called Career Connections. And this is your opportunity to participate in video chats with industry experts and get advice from veterans who themselves, in a lot of cases, made the transition from the military to the private sector. It's really a way where you might be able to focus your career search on a specific industry or sector in the private sector. We're also going to have CEOs from major companies, again, a lot of whom are veterans themselves, talk to us about how their experience in the military was so important, but also why they value hiring veterans inside their companies. And the last track, the third channel, is called the Entrepreneur Track. And this is basically a college-level business course or courses that you can get access to help you start your own business if you're interested in doing that, to help grow your small business, to help turn any ideas that you have into realities. So that's a brief overview of VetNet. We're really glad you could join us today. Please tune into some of the other channels. Use this as a resource above and beyond what you have inside the various government organizations like the VA or Department of Labor or even inside DOD. We want this to be a site that people can go to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to get the advice they need. Now I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have, again, two great companies with us today. The first one I'd like to introduce is Gary Profit from Wal-Mart. Gary and I have been working a long time together on veterans employment issues. Gary is a retired U.S. Army Brigadier General, and he's the Senior Director of Military Programs at Wal-Mart. We also have with us today Evan Guzman, who is this Senior Consultant of Global Strategic Talent Acquisition for military programs specifically, and for Veterans Affairs at Verizon. Evan's brother served with 2-9 in the Marine Corps. I'm a Marine myself, so that's near and dear to my heart. And Evan's brother is a wounded warrior. This work has really become Evan's passion. It's apparent every day when we work with him. So I'd like to welcome both the panelists. And before we turn it over to them for a couple of basic questions, I want to point out two things. Today, the purpose of the panel is very simple. We want to talk about the vast array of career opportunities that exist in the retail sector, and particularly those for veterans. And we'll get into both Wal-Mart and Verizon, and I'll try to relate some stories from other companies who have hired through our program. I'd like to encourage all the veterans who are listening to please feel free to submit questions as we go along, and then we will field those questions as a group, or if you have a specific question for Walmart or for Verizon, or for that matter for Hiring Our Heroes in general, please feel free to ask it. Those questions will be queued up. You can do it right there on the site you're following, Google+, or you can do it vis-a-vis YouTube. So the first question I think we should ask is probably at the crux of what the veterans who are tuned in today are interested in. And I'm going to start this with Gary. I think, Gary, it amazes me when I think about the size of Walmart. In many ways, it's like a small country. But if you could talk about the vast array of career opportunities across Walmart, and for veterans, if they're interested in pursuing a career in Walmart, what's your advice on how they should prepare for that? So I'd like to start with you, and then we'll go over to Evan right after that with the same question.
Kevin, first of all, thank you for including us in the panel to represent Walmart. To the centerpiece of your question, Walmart essentially has an insatiable appetite for talent that spans a wide spectrum. Those kinds of things that people are more familiar associated with career opportunities in store and Sam's Club operations management are certainly familiar to most people. But what people are less familiar with is Walmart is increasingly a global company that operates certainly in brick and mortar formats, but more and more in e-commerce and other kinds of media. Additionally, we have become, I think, more than a bit familiar with a supply chain operation that people can think of well beyond the logistics and transportation functions, although those are centerpieces. But it more and more goes to how we source products for our businesses. And just to give you a sense of the scale, Walmart employs about 2.1 million people globally, about 1.5 million of which are in the United States. And so I think from a sense of scale, I hope that gives you some insights. One of the best recommendations that I could give to anyone at the outset is to take a look at our website, which I think you may be able to see. It's walmartcareerswithamission.com, and I think is a very important entry point into Walmart. It links to the larger career site and gives people access to all of the opportunities that exist throughout the Walmart corporate footprint. And importantly, just a bit of a foundational advice. You're to some extent, if you're joining us today, participating in a very important networking format. And that's at the centerpiece of how people make successful transitions from the military to a career after taking off uniform. And it allows people to have a discussion with people that can help them understand their career aspirations, can help them understand how they will build and offer a personal brand, and to the extent that there are gaps in their personal brand portfolio associated with being successful in their career aspirations, it gives them an opportunity, I think, very effectively to talk people that have made successful transitions. So let me leave it at that, Kevin, and once again, thank you for allowing us to join you today.
Thanks, Gary. That's a great overview. I think, Evan, there are obviously different opportunities at Verizon. I was actually in a Verizon store this weekend buying an iPhone 5, which is really a nice piece of gear. And I think a lot of in my mind, having you join was really focused on the wireless side and some of the retail opportunities there. But since we have you, I think it's good for you to cover the full breadth and scope of the opportunities at Verizon. Try to put it in buckets maybe, and then we'll go to some more questions after that.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, Kevin. Gary, it's always a pleasure to chime in with you in conversations that we're having related to veterans. I'm happy to be here because I believe that Verizon does have unique opportunities that I feel are directly aligned with a lot of what our military members are trained for, being technically advanced in most cases. The types of career opportunities we typically try to recruit veterans for, in particular, are really with high level within retail sales, customer service, but we have a lot more opportunities where we look for, officers and above for career opportunities within Verizon. But when you look at retail, retail is one of those easy foot in the door opportunities, and we've got a lot of veterans that started within the retail industry, and then we mimicked what they were used to in the military, and they've grown within the organization to become managers, director level within other parts, not just retail, but other parts of the business. We're trying to really mobilize teams across the U.S. and use our retail stores as a hub to actually recruit veterans while they're there. We also try to engage with them about career opportunities with other veterans that are at the retail store to sort of get a sense of what's going on and what types of career opportunities would be in line with veterans. For instance, in the Marine Corps, I spoke to an 0311 infantry. He asked, Evan, how can my skills relate to business? And the first thing I said, well, there's one thing you learn in the 0311 is, you establish a lot of lines. You do a lot of lines of communications. There's a lot of hands-on abilities there that we look for. So you could start out as a field tech out in the field and understand the wireless side of the house, understand the wireline side of the house. So there are 3 levels of opportunities that we look for veterans for, in particular, especially transitioning military. So we can better assess them based on the questions and needs that they have. We then try to link it with career opportunities within Verizon.
That's great. I think I'm going to use this as an opportunity to touch on a little self-promotion, but then kind of tie it back to the real issue at hand, is how veterans are best able to apply for jobs at both Wal-Mart and Verizon. But I want to start out by saying both of your companies have been big supporters of Hiring Our Heroes. Our core mission, our core competency is really to do hiring fairs in local communities, job fairs for veterans and military spouses specifically across the country. It's really a grassroots campaign. We've done just over 370 hiring fairs in over 18 months, and more than 14,100 veterans and military spouses have gotten jobs just as a result of those fairs. The reason I bring that up is both Walmart and Verizon have been a big part of that effort from the very beginning. Literally, in dozens and dozens of the cities we've been in, your recruiters have been very active with us and have actually, gotten great results at those fairs. But they're limited at what they can do. So from Walmart hiring a Purple Heart recipient at a fair in Arkansas, Arkansas that went for a job in Texas, to your work in Texas itself, where you hired several military spouses at the fair in Fort Hood, to Verizon's success in places like Atlanta and Toms River, where you hired 5 or 6 veterans on the spot. I think those are great efforts, but the fact is that hiring fairs are just one means to an end in terms of getting the talent you want. And I think for the veterans who are listening, what is the best way for them to apply for a job or land a job at both Walmart and Verizon? So we'll flip-flop here, Evan. You get first dibs.
Sure.
And then I'll switch over to Gary. You can just chime in at the end, Gary.
You bet.
Yeah, I'll just say that one of the best ways that we find. I'm sorry, was Gary going first? I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Evan.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering, what we were trying to do is branding is really going to be one of the key areas for a lot of transitioning militaries. How do they get seen and heard? And I believe that the Chamber is even addressing this as far as how do you brand yourself? How do you look for opportunities within Verizon or Walmart for that matter? I know at Verizon we have a lot of recruiters online, and we usually find great candidates through LinkedIn because they saw us involved in Hiring Our Heroes. And that's a great way to really network. If you could find recruiters on LinkedIn, I think you could find anyone on LinkedIn nowadays. Or maybe perhaps Kevin and Kevin knows me. He can make the introductions. We've actually hired 4 folks, 4 veteran transitioning military in the last, I believe, 6 weeks just through LinkedIn because they were able to brand themselves in such a unique way to be seen and heard. So we immediately took that as a skill set that, this guy gets it, this girl gets it. So we went ahead and just made some reasonable accommodations to really bring them in the door.
That's great.
Kevin, I guess the best thing that I could recommend that people do, and we are, Sherry Eiler, who works with me, and I are glad to talk and network with anyone that has an interest. And whether we do that through a forum like this, or whether we do that in a Hiring Our Heroes event, and we've done countless ones across the country and across our corporate footprint, or in more national events. But increasingly, as Evan suggested, candidate pools are being sourced through professional social media, and LinkedIn is merely an example. And so building a profile on LinkedIn, or building a profile on our applicant tracking system, which is accessible through the website I mentioned earlier, is very important, because as we begin then to work with you, we then, if you assume what I mentioned earlier, we have this insatiable appetite, because Walmart hires somewhere between 500 and 600,000 people in the course of a year. And they're across an entire spectrum, from left to right and from north to south. So I think that the way to get most involved with a company that must scale early and often is to do it in that kind of way that people are now networking.
That's great. I just want to touch on a couple things and then kind of loop back to the question. One of the things that Evan mentioned is this whole idea of personal branding, and we launched an initiative here back in August with Dakota Meyer and Toyota Motor Company to try to get younger veterans to do a better job of talking about the skills they learned in the military. But it definitely includes this aspect of networking. And what we are going to do over time, that program at the beginning was very high touch. We were using our hiring fairs to get Dakota to speak, as well as hand out some materials on what we meant by personal branding. But we have these incredible technologies out there. If you think about LinkedIn and the fact that a lot of younger veterans don't utilize that networking capability, don't set up their own profiles, we're going to set up a personal branding toolkit on Hiring Our Heroes, which is being built now, which will include a video on how to create a LinkedIn profile, because we feel so passionately about it. And listen, this Google Plus technology, these Hangouts we're doing right now, can become another means of networking. If the more and more robust it becomes, the more veterans that start to use it, the more companies start to use it, the more likely we'll be able to make the connections that we want to make. So I encourage people to go to our site to look at that personal branding toolkit, to get familiar with it. In 4 months, there will be an actual technology where folks can spit in their military qualifications, the schools they've been to, their deployments, their awards, their MOSs, which I include last for a very real reason, because that's not what your military service is all about. And it will spit out civilian language that you can use to talk to employers and help develop your resume and your 90-second elevator pitch, so that when you talk to employers, you'll be ready and you'll be more equipped than you are right now.
Kevin, if I could just weigh in right there in kind of a conversational sort of note, I think it's very important, just based upon what you had indicated, that people don't fall into the trap of merely trying to crosswalk the technical training that they've received while in the military. While we regard that as robust and certainly foundational, from my point of reference, it's the huge investment that this nation and they themselves have made in their leader growth and development that really is where the dividends are paid over their counterparts in their age categories. That's the first thing. And the second thing is, one of the things that we do from a very high touch perspective from our web presence is we send out a newsletter every month that is not intended to drive people to Walmart, but is intended to help people kind of navigate the issues that are most prevalent in networking, branding, understanding career aspirations, and all of those kinds of things that is first and foremost designed to help people do what we think we have already done successfully.
That's a great lead into a question I want to ask. I'm a firm believer that the intangibles you learn in the military, leadership and management, um, the ability to work well in teams, just the general work ethic are things that translate best to employers, and it's what they're looking for because that is the foundation for a great employee. So I wanted to quickly turn it over to you, Evan, and ask, based on what Gary just said, what would be the military skills that best translate to the retail industry or to Verizon as a company?
Okay, well, thanks for the question. You know, it was one of the first questions I asked when I initially started with Verizon is, you know, where are the skill sets we're looking for so we know how to better target them within the veteran communities. And the one thing that kept coming up was project management, obviously leadership and working within teams. But one of the things that did come up during a conversation with our IT is rapid decision making. In the game of technology and competitive markets, they have to, you know, our teams need to be able to make split decisions right away. And that's what military pretty much trains you for. You know, they're trained specifically to make these rapid decisions, you know, adjust, adapt, and move forward. So those are the types of intrinsic skill sets we look for. We're changing how we're interviewing, and we're going based on situational and behavioral-based questions, so we can extract those skill sets that the veterans bring, so that our hiring managers can see the bigger picture. We speak to veterans, and sometimes they'll just tell you, I drive a truck. But we know there's so much more than that. Or they drive a tank, and we know there's so much more than that. So the skills that we're looking for are basically anything that would add value to the business. It could be IT, it could be engineering, but it's beyond those technical skill sets that we're looking for. And it really leads to being able to make the best decisions for your business. So, you know, rapid decision making, leadership, teamwork, and the ability to adapt within an ever-changing environment.
That's terrific. I recount a story that with another retailer, GameStop, who was at our hiring fair in Atlanta. There was a young Marine named Xavier Reese, who was a 5-time Iraq veteran. He had been in Atlanta visiting friends after he had separated from Camp Lejeune. On his way back home, he stopped in Atlanta, and he started continuing his drive. He had gotten about 500 miles from Atlanta, turned around, and got hired on the spot. He went back to the Atlanta fair, got hired by GameStop, and was brought on as an associate manager in a store. And the thing that resonated most with me about learning about him was the manager said that for the first time, and you can imagine a manager of a store, for the first time he felt like he could leave the store to this young man because of his incredible work ethic, because of his loyalty, because of what he did as a Marine, that he could be trusted with the store and with the management of the store. So it really resonates, and I think that's a great opportunity for younger veterans, because leadership and management is one of the things that I think the retailers are desperate for. And a story like that, a young sergeant like Xavier Reese making the transition, is pretty inspiring. I think the only other question I wanted to touch on, because we've heard it with a lot of the other panels, is to kind of look 5 or 10 years out at the retail industry, and what may some of the changes be? What should veterans look at down the horizon? So if I were a sergeant in the Army, and I'm leaving Fort Bragg, and I'm looking for opportunities in the retail sector, obviously I may want to get a job right away, but if I wanted to use my GI Bill to get a degree at night, what are the things that I should be focused on based on the future of the industry? And I'll start that with Gary if you have anything to say, and Evan, you can just chime in again at the end.
Sure, thanks, Kevin. Well, first of all, I think the retail industry is evolving, and from Walmart's perspective, the retail business will be increasingly global and will be increasingly represented by different formats to include online and mobile in very big ways. So all of the technological savvy that folks that have served in and around the military bring to the space are going to be very central in all of that. Walmart continues to grow both in this country and beyond, and I just think the opportunities here for people, for example, that we hire today as assistant managers in our store or club operations that someday will run $100 million stores. And so the upside to all of this is pretty substantive, and I think Evan touched on it. Sometimes just getting a foot in the door and beginning to showcase the value that you bring to the business is the path forward to much greater things, because we have to feel a commitment to growing and developing our associates, and once you get to be a part of that base and you've demonstrated the potential for higher opportunities, I think they're fairly limitless here.
I'd like to chime in and just add to that what Gary had said. And Verizon isn't showing any signs of slowing down. And there's a lot of things that Verizon does. We have products and services everywhere. It's really a full understanding of how technology is advancing, and understanding that we're really entering a technical world. Everything is virtual. Everything is basically done behind a computer. So if you're going to pursue a career or anything like that, and you're looking for opportunities to get your foot in the door, you got to pick the areas where there is that skills gap. And in IT, at Verizon, we're seeing there's a huge skills gap within IT and engineering. So veterans are coming out with some technical skills, and they want to take advantage of their GI Bill. The first thing is really understanding their interests, and if they have an interest in IT, if they have an interest in engineering, or even sales and retail, marketing and finance, we want to meet them even at the colleges when they're there. So we want to sort of bring them in. But I think IT and engineering is pretty much the way to go as far as if you're looking to pursue careers. I think it's one of the most growing industries out there.
And you're finding more and more of your candidates, Evan, have that skill set anyway. So just to be competitive nowadays, you probably have to have some type of IT background, or at least demonstrated proficiency, right?
Yeah, well, yes. And the funny thing, I'm glad you mentioned that, Kevin, because before I started at Verizon, we were getting technical individuals, but because of the degree issue, we had to sort of work with that and say, well, let's look at, again, we're asking skills and experience. We have to sort of change our tone in terms of what we're looking for and what we're asking, because a lot of these veterans who are leaving have technical skills. I mean, the military is one of the most advanced, technologically advanced, training institutions in the world.
Yeah, I mean, personal frustration is a lot of younger veterans don't realize a lot of the skills they do have,
yeah,
and not articulating it the right way when they talk to employers. As we're approaching Christmas, I thought it might be a good question to ask Wal-Mart specifically about part-time opportunities. Obviously, this panel is geared towards veterans, but for some who are unemployed, sometimes part-time opportunities lead to bigger and better things. And obviously, Wal-Mart has needs in certain areas. So, Gary, if you could talk about some of the part-time opportunities that are available in line with Christmas season, that'd be great.
Sure. Every holiday season, we obviously ramp up for what is the most important part of the year for us. With that said, most of that hiring, Kevin, obviously has been completed for the year, because we're in the midst of the throes of that particular season. But it's a very important opportunity for people to begin a relationship with Wal-Mart. Whether it's a temporary employee at the corporate office, or whether it's a part-time employee in one of our stores or distribution centers or transportation offices, it's yet another vehicle to showcase skills and leadership and values to leaders that can then make those full-time hiring decisions. So I think it's a very important segment. And I would further say, as people transition, what we're to some extent finding is that as they make life decisions, some of them aren't necessarily ready to accept full-time work, because they're trying to decide if this is a place for them to land, or if their career aspirations require them to go to a community college or a vocational technical school, or to a four-year institution to receive a bachelor's degree. And we think one of the things that we can ultimately do is to help mentor these folks in those career aspiration discussions from a position of someone who is actually working in the civilian sector.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that. Whenever I meet with veterans out at the Hiring Our Hero events and we have conversations, the first thing I go back to is, You got to get your foot in the door. You know, in the competitive market, we have to go with who we know and what opportunities are available to our veterans to get their foot in the door. Because I know once they do, everything else they basically do within the business is seen. We have a lot of call centers that started in retail part-time who are now managers because they apply those skill sets, they adapt the skill sets they learn in the military. So when it comes to retail, it's a lot easier to get folks in the door through a part-time channel. And that's how we're able to really drive the traffic is let's start in retail, launch a career there, and then let everything else fall into play as you grow.
That's great. I want to take this opportunity just to talk about an initiative which both your companies will be a part of, and just kind of show veterans. It's called the Fast Track program. The Chamber launched this recently, and actually Google helped us with this mapping technology. And the idea is very simple. When I was in the Marine Corps, I was in charge of enlisted assignments monitors and talked to young people every day about their decision to stay or leave the Marine Corps. One thing I learned was that when younger people, and for that matter, most veterans who leave, they consider where they're going in the country, vice what they're going to do next, or how to use their GI Bill. So the map that we were developing, actually shows the 100 cities in America that are forecasted to grow the most in terms of job growth. So we want to show veterans that these are the 100 cities they should consider when they're making their transition. Even if it's not in their hometown, it could be close to it. Then we've populated those 100 cities with job opportunities, and as you mouse over a specific city, you'll see that the 5 major industries that are driving growth in each of those cities. Over time, the idea will be to actually show the critical path to employment. What do I mean by that? If you were going back to a city and it showed that one major industry was driving growth, we would like you to consider using your GI Bill to get a credential or license or a certification, at least to get a job in that industry that requires high-skill work and would value the skills that you bring from the military. I think there's a real opportunity across the country for retail because they are representative of a lot of the sectors that'll be part of that map, to include IT, to include transportation, to include infrastructure and logistics. Companies like Wal-Mart and Verizon have vast needs. So I'd encourage veterans who are making the transitioning service members to look at that early, to consider where the jobs are and who's hiring, because that's a key thing that younger people don't consider when they're leaving the military. We're gonna wrap this panel up. I'm just gonna see if the audience has any questions. If you do have questions, please go ahead and send them to us now. We'll be fielding questions with the panelists, and then if your questions aren't answered because we have a series of them, we'll make sure we answer them in the next 48 hours vis-a-vis writing. The last thing I wanted to ask is what are the if you had advice that you could give any veteran when you look back at your own transition, which I transitioned 3 years ago, and think about it, what advice would you give them, having walked in their shoes, or for that matter, you know, Gary, you're a brigadier general, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. Obviously our path would be different from an E5, but we deal with young people every day. So not only in your own shoes, but if you were to talk to a younger person, specifically those 24 and under E5s and below who are leaving the military, what advice would you give them and share with the audience, Gary?
The biggest bit of advice I would give to anyone is first of all, to reinforce what I said earlier. It's very important that you understand as a potential candidate for an industry or a company what it is you want to do. Because when you talk about companies like Wal-Mart and Verizon, and you accept the fact that we essentially have an insatiable appetites for talent, the first question I'm going to ask you is, tell me less about what you've done and tell me what you'd like to do. And then relate all of that to what you've done and how you believe that you can add value. And we'll do what we can to help you network within that framework. And finally, Kevin, I would say, we're going to look at you to make sure that you're going to be a cultural fit with Wal-Mart. you ought to be doing the same thing and making sure that you're going to feel very comfortable with the cultural fit as you view it. Because the fact of the matter is we've all been a part of very values-based institutions of which we're very familiar and very comfortable. And you need to feel that same kind of comfort when you look at future career opportunities.
Yeah, and I like to add, and speaking from my own personal experience with my brother when he came back, his main concern was not feeling comfortable with a new environment he was used to. I have other people that I've recruited transitioning from the military, and their main concern is not knowing. And what I can say without any uncertainty is that there is more for veterans in particular. There are more skill sets that you will bring to the business than the business is looking for. You're going to add so much more value to it. So don't be intimidated by being in a new corporate environment, a new work environment, because it's all going to go back to the same. You're going to be able to adapt those skill sets, and you're going to be one of the best top talent on your team. And I've seen it right 3 times. We've hired a couple of wounded warriors. They had the same apprehension of, I don't know if I'm ready for this corporate environment. I don't, there are a lot of questions and answers. And at the end of the day, once they worked there for about a week or so, they realized I could do this because they've been through far more. They've been challenged and they've been vetted to a greater extent than they'll ever be challenged in corporate America. So don't be shy. Go in there and bring your game and just give it everything the military's taught you, and you will excel, guaranteed, just by default. I've seen it happen time and time again.
That's a great wrap up. I think I would add that veterans bring something to the table that a lot of their peers don't bring. Folks that have gone to school for 4 years while they serve, especially those 24 and under. I think veterans, transitioning service members and veterans need to treat it as a competition. This is a tough job market. There is no charity, there is no entitlement in the private sector. So they've got to treat it the same way they did when they were in the military, in the schoolhouse, on the rifle range. Whatever the case may be, they've got to bring their full game to the table, and they've got to compete in that environment. I think the other takeaway from this panel is there are an incredible amount of opportunities in both of your great companies, and a lot of times it takes research. It takes going on the websites that we showed and doing a deeper dive, because the opportunities are endless. If you put Verizon and Walmart together, there are hundreds and hundreds of different career opportunities that exist, some which you could walk right out of the military and get a job, and some which maybe you don't want to do the same thing in the military. I think they would find opportunities that would be appealing to them. So I want to first thank the panelists for joining. Gary and Evan, I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy days to be on the panel. I want to thank the veterans and transitioning service members who tuned in today to VetNet, and want to encourage you to continue to use this resource as it grows and becomes more and more valuable to our community. Your feedback is welcome, not just if you have specific questions for the panelists or for Hiring Our Heroes or for VetNet in general. Please don't only send your questions, but send us your feedback. Tell us what you think we can do better, or what you would like to see. If you do send a question, we'll make sure we answer it in 48 hours. Again, thank you to our panelists, thank you to our audience, and thank you for your service to your country, and everyone have a Merry Christmas.